Today's webinar on the Lower Thames Crossing Design Refinements Consultation. Tonight we're going to be providing you with an overview of proposed refinements to the Lower Thames Crossing with a particular focus on refinements in Thurrock and Essex. To be clear, this isn't an exhaustive view of every proposed refinement. Rather, we're providing you with an overview of some of the more notable refinements made to our proposals since our supplementary consultation earlier on this year. So we'll start off today by briefly introducing ourselves. Hello, my name's Sarah Walker, and I'm the Communications and Engagement Lead for Highways England, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar.
Hello everyone, I'm Steve Roberts and I'm the Engineering Design Lead for Lower Thames Crossing, and I'll be running through many of our proposed refinements today, as well as helping to answer your questions a little later on.
Hi, I'm Gary Hodge, the Technical Lead for Lower Thames Crossing Project, and I'll be helping to answer many of the questions today.
And we've also got Charlotte and Emily with us today, who you can see on camera throughout the webinar. They are British Sign Language interpreters and will be providing sign language translation for those in attendance who are deaf or have hearing impairments. Should you wish to expand the view of the BSL interpreters at any time, simply hover your mouse over their camera and click the button to expand. Similarly, should you wish to turn off the BSL interpreter video, then just hover your mouse over the camera and click the X in the normal way. Lastly, behind the scenes, our colleague David is helping us out today to make sure this webinar gets to your screen successfully. In case we have any technical difficulties of any sort, you may hear one of us asking for help and for his help to progress the webinar onwards. So today we're going to look to provide you with an introduction to the Lower Thames Crossing project and give you an overview of why we're consulting again. We'll also let you know how to find out more information and how to submit an official response to the consultation. At the end of today's session, we'll also be holding a question and answer session where we'll be taking and answering your questions about the design refinement consultation, and we're going to show you how to do that right now. We're looking to focus today's question and answer session on the design refinement consultation. If you've got any questions about the project in general that fall outside of that, please email info@lowerthamescrossing.co.uk. Should you have any questions pertaining to any land interest that Highways England has written to you about, then please contact us directly using our telephone surgery service, and the number for that is 0300 123 5000. To ask a question today, please look on your screen for the question mark button or click the field that just says questions. You can then type in your question at any point during today's webinar. We'll be getting to your questions after we run you through the proposed refinements. Your questions will only be visible to you and the project team here on the webinar. We may not have time to get to all the questions today. We'll do our best, of course, but if your question isn't answered, we encourage you to book a callback using our telephone surgery service. Callbacks can be booked on our website, www.lowerthamescrossing.co.uk/design-consultation, or of course you can call us on 0300 123 5000. So I'm now going to take this opportunity to provide a brief overview of the Lower Thames Crossing project. The Lower Thames Crossing is a proposed new road connecting Kent, Thurrock and Essex through two 2.6-mile tunnels beneath the River Thames. It would almost double road capacity across the river east of London, boosting local, regional and national economies, while offering new connections, better journeys and of course fewer delays. On the south side of the river, the new road would link to the A2 and M2 in Kent, and on the north side, it would link to the A13 in Thurrock and the M25 in Havering. We're proposing a number of refinements to the design of the Lower Thames Crossing based on feedback received during previous consultations and also on engagement with our stakeholders and ongoing design work. We now also have a much better understanding of some of the technical constraints, including new information about existing utilities. The proposed refinements include reduction to the overall size of the development boundary, minor changes to highways design, updated paths for pedestrians, cyclists and horse riders, fewer utilities diversions, more detailed landscaping proposals, and further developed ecological mitigation measures. You can respond to this consultation in several ways, either through our website, by post, or by email. Should you know anyone who doesn't have access to the internet, they're also able to call us on 0300 123 5000 to provide a response to the consultation over the phone. We're now going to go straight into the refinements with a short video that will show you the changes south to north along the section of the route that we're covering today. Based on feedback from previous consultations, engagement with our stakeholders, design, development and new technical data, we're now proposing a number of refinements to the design of the Lower Thames crossing. We're currently holding a further round of consultation, which means that until 11:59 p.m. on the 12th of August 2020, you'll have the opportunity to view and comment on our latest proposals. Your feedback is vitally important in making sure we get all aspects of the design, the construction and the operation of the scheme right, and your responses will play a fundamental role in firming up our plans for the Lower Thames crossing. In this video, I want to give you a brief introduction into some of the key design refinements we're proposing in Thurrock and Essex. Because we've refined the design of utility diversions in areas along the route, it means our overall development boundary, which is the land we need to construct the scheme, has reduced in size. This means that the number of properties inside the development boundary has nearly halved. You can see more details on this in our consultation documents online and in our virtual exhibition. If your property is in or near the development boundary, we will have written to you directly, but if you've got any questions, please do get in touch. Around the northern tunnel entrance near Tilbury, we're proposing to install utilities that would provide a power supply to the tunnel boring machine and northern tunnel entrance during and following construction. A new water supply for the tunnel boring machine and construction site area would also be required. This supply would come from the Linford borehole and a local water main. We're also proposing earthworks which would create a new landform design around the tunnel entrance and provide wide-ranging views overlooking the Thames estuary. Following feedback from landowners and stakeholders, the maintenance access tracks around the northern tunnel entrance would be moved closer to the Lower Thames crossing. This is to allow for a shorter culvert length, which would minimise the impact on the local ecology and allow wildlife to navigate through the culvert more easily. 2 footpaths in the area would also be slightly realigned, and a new shared path along the south of Muckingford Road would also be progressed. This would allow for better connectivity between Chadwell St Mary and East Tilbury. Near the A13 junction in Orsett, we're now proposing a new area of land for the relocation of the Travellers site. This would be adjacent to its current location with access off Gallenfields Way. As part of our woodland planting proposals, we've identified 2 separate areas off Baker Street that we would look to make accessible to the public. Due to the essential realignment of a watercourse, we're proposing to remove a false cutting that we previously proposed in a section of the route between the A128 Brentwood Road and Hoford Road. So we're now developing other ways to help conceal the Lower Thames crossing. Further details on this can be found in our consultation maps and documents online. As part of our utility proposals, we're planning a new permanent compound at Stanford Road, just to the east of Orsett Cock Roundabout. This would be required for the operation and maintenance of a proposed gas pipeline, which would supply the local community. In the vicinity of the Mardyke, we're proposing permanent access from Green Lane for the national grid. This is so it could maintain overhead electricity transmission cables during the diversion works and afterwards for the operation of the network.
North of Thames Chase Forest Centre, we're proposing a new maintenance access track and a multi-utilities diversion. We've located these within the same area to limit the reduction in woodland compensation that would be required to accommodate these changes. Around junction 29 of the M25 within the vicinity of the B186 North Road, some above and below ground multi-utilities would need to be diverted to facilitate the proposed route. Full details about these utilities proposals can be found in consultation maps and documents online. We've been exploring solutions to maintain connectivity over the A127 and propose a new footbridge which would link the existing routes. We've carried out detailed noise assessments and have identified locations along the route where noise barriers could be used to reduce the sound of traffic for local communities. Further details on these proposed locations of the noise barriers can be found in our consultation documents and maps online and in our virtual exhibition. These are just some of the design refinements we're consulting on. To view and comment on all the latest proposals, please visit the Lower Thames Crossing website, explore our online exhibition, and of course follow us on Facebook and Twitter for updates. This consultation is an important opportunity for you to have your say before we submit our development consent order application later on this year. So please do submit a response online, by free post, email, or simply by calling us. Thank you for watching.
Sorry, I think I was muted. Apologies, everybody. Steve Roberts here again. So just to complement the video that you've just watched, we'll now run through the refinements in a little more depth, starting by covering some of the key themes regarding the development boundary, the environmental impacts, landscaping and utilities. We'll dive into the refinements on a junction by junction basis. So let's get started by discussing the development boundary. Okay, so we have the development boundary map on screen right now, I believe. I'm just going to ask the technical man, Dave. I'm unable to see the slides at the moment, so I'm trusting you to progress the slides for me. Okay. So looking at the development boundary map shown on the screen right now, we've been able to reduce the amount of land required by around 12.5% by refining the design of utility diversions in some areas along the route. Within this revised development boundary, there's now some additional land that will be required permanently, whereas other areas like construction sites will only be needed temporarily, with any land being reinstated and returned to its owner once construction is complete. If your property is affected by the scheme, you should have been written to already. And if you have received a letter, please feel free to give us a call to discuss it on 0300 123 5000. That's 0300 123 5000. Okay, so on to environmental impacts now. Firstly, ancient woodlands. Following feedback from our supplementary consultation, we've been able to refine the land required for utility diversions shown at supplementary consultation. In doing so, we've been able to reduce the impacts to various wooded areas. Regarding green bridges, we've improved our landscaping proposals, resulting in better opportunity for ecological connectivity. This means that we will now have consolidated green space on the bridges, which feature vegetation like hedgerows, shrubs, trees, and grassland. And this will make it more attractive for wildlife to use as a crossing point over any given road. And finally, noise barriers. To help mitigate noise, we've introduced noise barriers in areas where higher noise levels and disturbance is anticipated. These barriers vary in length and height along the route. To learn more about a specific noise barrier, please refer to the Guide to Design Refinement consultation. Now on to landscaping. As we've progressed the design of the Lower Thames Crossing, We'll have also developed more detailed landscaping proposals to mitigate visual impacts of the project's above ground infrastructure. Since supplementary consultation, we've added more detail on the specific type of ecological mitigation proposed across the route, such as more grassland, woodland, and further refinements around watercourses. And we've also provided an update on new landforms and new viewpoints. Turning now to utilities, we've continued to refine our proposals for the utility diversions across the route and are now proposing some further changes to the position presented at supplementary consultation. One of the more notable updates include the need for new small substations along the route. Substations will be approximately 3 meters wide by 3 meters long and around 2.5 meters in height. The number and location of these substations will be confirmed following further design work and continued engagement with our stakeholders. Okay, so now we'll dive into the refinements north of the Thames, beginning with the Tilbury area and the area around the Northern Tunnel entrance. So on the screen right now, I can't see it myself, but I hope you can. There should be an image showing the Northern Tunnel entrance near Tilbury as we presented it at the supplementary consultation. And next we'll switch between this and an image showing our proposals for this design refinement consultation so that hopefully you can see the difference. Okay, so turning to the differences in this area, firstly landscaping. As indicated by point 1 on the image on screen, a new landform with footpaths will lead up to elevated viewpoints looking out to the south, east and west, from where Coalhouse and Tilbury forts will be visible. The landform design will be created using excavated material from the tunnel, and the surrounding area will be restored for agricultural purposes, which is in keeping with the existing land use. With regards to utility proposals in this area, to supply temporary utilities to the construction site and permanent supply to the Northern Tunnel entrance, some works will be required that sit approximately 1.5 kilometres outside of the development boundary shown at supplementary consultation. Staying in this area, now looking at the Tilbury North Tunnel portal from another angle, as we presented it at supplementary consultation, and we'll again switch between this image and one showing our proposals for the design refinement consultation so that you can see the difference. Okay, next slide, please. So moving to some more detail in this area, firstly, noise barriers. Shown as points 1A through to 1C on the image, the Tilbury area will feature 4 noise barriers as part of our noise mitigation efforts. If you'd like to learn specifics about these barriers, please see the guide to the design refinement consultation, which is available on our exhibition website. For walkers, cyclists and horse riders, paths are shown as numbers 2A and 2B on the image. The path closest to us is footpath 200. The path furthest towards the East Tilbury, is footpath 61. Footpath 61 has been slightly amended to use more of the existing footpath and to follow the existing field boundary. This refinement reduces the amount of land that will be required permanently in this area. Footpath 200 will be diverted around the edge of the field rather than pass through it, as was proposed at supplementary consultation. This would connect with the existing footpath at either end, and this proposal is closer to the original alignment. Taking a closer look at the paths in this area, we've marked the refinements described a moment ago to footpaths 61 and 200 in purple on this map, with existing paths in green. and what was shown at supplementary consultation in orange. You can also see where we've made refinements indicated by the dotted X's. These refinements reduce the amount of land that will be required permanently in this area. Okay, moving on to utilities in the Tilbury area. As the tunnel boring machine would need a water supply to assist with the excavation process, we're proposing 2 routes to gain access to water using the Linford borehole, as well as a local water main located near Fort Road and Gun Hill. Details of where we propose to route the water mains can be found in the Guide to Design Refinement Consultation. In addition to the works described previously, we're also planning on the addition of 2 substations in the areas surrounding the northern tunnel entrance. These again are described in more detail in our Guide to Design Refinement Consultation. So just to recap on those refinements, hopefully you'll see on screen a map which is also shown on pages 44 to 45 of the Design Refinement Consultation Guide, so you can cross-reference. Starting with number 5 on this map, you'll see where we propose the lookout over the Thames estuary. Moving on to utility diversions, points 6 through to 9 show some of the utility diversions that we're proposing. Point 6 in particular shows the new alignment to connect the water supply from Linford borehole to the construction site and the tunnel boring machine. And finally, points 10 through to 13 show the proposed location of noise barriers in this area. Okay, so now we'll dive into refinements around the Orsett-Cock roundabout near the A13 junction. Just before we do that, I just wanted to remind everybody that you can submit questions throughout this webinar, so please do feel free to send those through as we go. You don't need to wait until the end, and we'll look to answer as many of your questions as we can after we've run through these details. So on the screen right now, I hope, is the A13 junction as we presented it at supplementary consultation. And we'll switch between this image and the one showing our proposals for this design refinement consultation so that you can see the difference. Okay, so to go through those differences in a bit more detail, firstly, with regards to the travellers site in this area, following further design work and feedback from our supplementary consultation, we're now proposing a new site adjacent to the current location with access off Gammon Fields Way. The travellers site would remain approximately 1.5 hectares in area, which is the same as it is now, with an additional 1.5 hectares set aside for appropriate access and landscaping. This is shown as number 1 on the image on screen. Moving to design refinements at the A13 junction, we proposed some changes to the merged layouts, and these are shown by number 2 on the image on screen. Where the A13 westbound and A1089 northbound slip joins the Lower Thames Crossing northbound carriageway, our modelling has shown that more heavy goods vehicles would join Lower Thames Crossing northbound from the A1089, so a different type of merge layout would be required. Also, where the slip road from the Orsett-Cock roundabout joins the existing A13 westbound, there's a slight increase in forecast traffic flows, meaning that we're proposing a different merge layout in this location as well. Next, we're proposing the removal of a false cutting or sloped embankment, which is between the A128 Brentford Road and Howford Road. This is because it was at the same location as a watercourse. The two were coincident, which required realigning to avoid Lower Thames Crossing. Removing of this sloped embankment would mean losing visual and noise screening. So some additional fencing and planting are proposed to help conceal Lower Thames Crossing. Turning to utilities, we currently propose 7 small substations in the vicinity of the A13 junction. These would be approximately 3 meters by 3 meters in size, with a total area of 5 meters by 4 meters. If you'd like to know the specific locations of these substations, you can find more details in the Guide to Design Refinement consultation. And turning to walkers, cyclists and horse riders, at supplementary consultation, we were exploring the feasibility of a new footpath connection under the A13. But following further investigation, it was determined that this route was not in a desirable location due to its close proximity to high-speed traffic. As a result, the open space to the north of the A13 that was proposed at supplementary consultation is no longer included in our plans, as it would not be accessible. Taking a closer look at paths in this area, we've marked the newest proposed refinements in purple, with existing paths in green and what was shown at supplementary consultation in orange. You can also see where we've made refinements shown by the dotted X's. Number 1 on this map shows the shared path proposed at supplementary consultation between Green Lane and Stiffers Clays Road, which will be amended so it's slightly closer to Lower Thames Crossing, which will avoid impacting some farmland. Number 2 shows what was discussed on the previous slide, where we're no longer proposing a shared path under the A13 due to its close proximity to the A13 slip roads. Moving on to woodlands, shown as number 1 on this image, as part of our planting proposals at the A13 junction, we have identified 2 separate woodland areas off Baker Street that we would look to make accessible to the public. There are also various noise barriers proposed in this area, as denoted by numbers 2A through to 2C on the image on screen. And also out of frame in this image is a noise barrier located at Brentford Road. Details of all the noise barriers are available in the Guide to Design Refinement consultation, which is available on our exhibition website. Turning to the next slide, hopefully you will see an image of Alsip Junction, which is near the A13, as presented at supplementary consultation. We'll switch between this image and one showing our proposals for the design refinement consultation so that you can see the difference. So beginning with noise barriers in this area, as denoted by numbers 1A and 1B on this image, there are 2 noise barriers proposed west of the Alsip Junction. And with regards to utilities, denoted by number 2 on the image, a permanent compound east of Alsip roundabout along Stanford Road is planned for the operation and maintenance of a proposed gas pipeline in this area. The facility, including equipment, would be located within an area approximately 35 meters by 35 meters and would include fencing for security reasons. Access for future maintenance would also be required off Stanford Road, and some land outside of the development boundary we presented at supplementary consultation would also be required for these works. This means the development boundary has been extended in this area. At the Alsip Showground, part of the site is required permanently for the construction of link roads, the Alsip roundabout and the A13, and we propose to move a gas pipeline, and permanent rights will be required over a limited corridor of land within the site in order to operate and maintain that pipeline. So a replacement site for part of the Alsip Showground has been proposed within the development boundary, and it's adjacent to the existing showground as denoted by number 2 on the image on screen. So just to recap on the refinements we've just covered on the previous slides, this map on screen is also shown on pages 56 to 57 and 58 to 59 of the Guide to Design Refinement consultation. Starting with number 1, this slide, this is where we propose changes to the merge layouts owing to improved modelling data. Number 2 shows where we're no longer progressing with a shared path under the A13. Number 3 shows where we have proposed the relocation of the traveller site adjacent to its current location. And number 4 shows where we propose the removal of the false cutting or sloped embankment. Number 10 shows the location of woodland areas off Baker Street that we're proposing to make accessible to the public. And finally, numbers 11 through to 18 show the location of noise barriers. Right, now we'll cover the refinements in the Mardyke and M25 Lower Thames Crossing junction areas. So on the screen right now, I hope, is one of the viaducts and embankments in the area of the Mardyke River, north of the A13 junction, as we presented it at supplementary consultation. Firstly, noise barriers in this area, as denoted by number 1 on this image. We're proposing noise barriers to run along the viaducts and embankment through the Mardyke area on both sides of the road. Details of these noise barriers are available in the Guide to Design Refinement Consultation or on our exhibition website. For utilities, National Grid will need access in this area to Green Lane for the maintenance of their overhead power lines. And this access will be required during the diversion works for the lines and afterwards for the operation of the network. These works will require the use of some land which is outside of the development boundary that we presented at supplementary consultation. By increasing the land for the works required in this location, we have more space, and this means that we can avoid impacting some existing vegetation. And on the screen now is the Lower Thames Crossing M25 junction as seen from 2 different perspectives that we presented at supplementary consultation. Beginning with the image on the left, we're looking at Lower Thames Crossing from the east of North Road Bridge and the area around the wilderness. And on the right, the view is showing Lower Thames Crossing joining the M25 northbound with Thames Chase in the foreground. So as before, we'll switch between these images and the ones showing our proposals for this design refinement consultation so you can see the difference. Okay, moving on to noise barriers in this area. We're proposing a noise barrier in the area of the wilderness. This is denoted by number 1 on the image on screen. Details of these noise barriers are available in the Guide to Design Refinement Consultation, as mentioned before. Also, with regards to woodland planting in this area, we're proposing to divert a watercourse within the area of the wilderness. And to accommodate this, we're proposing a reduction in woodland planting in this area. This is shown as number 2 on the screen. And with regards to utilities in this area, we're currently proposing 1 small substation, details of which are in the Guide to Design Refinement Consultation. Moving to Thames Chase Forest Centre, shown as number 1 on this image, and within the area of the Thames Chase Forest, we're proposing a new maintenance access track, which will be shared with a multi-utility diversion corridor north of Thames Chase Forest Centre. These are located in the same area to minimise the reduction in woodland compensation. And shown as number 2 on this image, we also propose to acquire replacement land to the north and south of Thames Chase Forest Centre. This would be landscaped to match the current site and would connect to existing paths. The replacement land would be designed to complement the existing forest. As part of the mitigation, we propose a footbridge over the Lower Thames Crossing and the M25 to improve connection between the western and eastern sections of the Thames Chase Community Forest. With regards to utilities, a sewer diversion may be required from Ockenden Road to St Mary's Lane via the B186. This is due to the proximity of the existing sewer pipes to the proposed Lower Thames Crossing route and the proposed Ockenden Road bridge construction works. This is shown as number 1 on the image. Some above and below ground utilities within the vicinity of the B186 North Road will also need to be diverted to facilitate the proposed Lower Thames Crossing route. Some of the overhead power lines in this area may also need to be placed underground to avoid Lower Thames Crossing. So let's recap on those refinements. This map on screen is also shown on pages 70 to 71 and 72 to 73 of the Guide to Design Refinement Consultation. So starting with number 6 on the map, this shows the location of sewer diversion works. Number 8 shows where utility works would take place in the vicinity of the B186 North Road. Number 10 on the map points out Thames Chase Community Forest, where we're proposing to reduce the woodland planting to accommodate a new maintenance track for utilities. Number 11 shows where reduced woodland planting would take place at the wilderness as a result of a watercourse diversion. And finally, points 12 through to 14 show the location of noise barriers from the Mardyke area to the Lower Thames Crossing M25 junction. So finally, we'll take a look at the refinements in and around junction 29 of the M25. On the screen right now is junction 29 of the M25 as we presented it at supplementary consultation. So at supplementary consultation, we showed an existing path next to the south side of the A127 that was impacted due to the addition of the segregated left turn lanes on and off the Lower Thames Crossing. These lanes meant that the existing crossing points to the south of the junction would no longer be feasible. So we now propose a footbridge over the A127 to link existing routes. Unfortunately, it's just off the image on screen, but I'll point it out on the next slide. So as shown on screen now, I hope, denoted by number 2 on the map, this indicates where we propose a new footbridge over the A127. And the other adjustments to our proposals are shown in purple colour. So to finally recap on these refinements that we've just covered on the previous slides, the map on screen is also on pages 82 to 83 of your guide. Starting with number 1, this shows the proposed footbridge over the A127, which will link existing facilities. Moving on to number 2, this is where the Folkes Lane gas diversion would take place, for which we require some additional land compared to what was presented at supplementary consultation. And finally, number 5 on the map shows where we're proposing to bury electricity distribution cables near the B186 Worley Street. And that wraps up the details of the refinements.
Hello again, thanks for that run through the proposed refinements to the route, Steve, and particularly well done because he obviously couldn't see what hopefully you could all see on those slides there. As we mentioned at the start of the webinar, our goal today was to provide you with an overview of some of the more notable refinements made in our proposals since our last supplementary consultation. If you'd like more information on the proposed refinements, we do suggest visiting www.lowerthamescrossing.co.uk/design-consultation, where you can access a full digital copy of the guide to the consultation, as well as a host of other consultation materials and maps as well. So let's take a very quick break now for 3 minutes, and we'll be right back to run through the questions that you've submitted before and hopefully throughout this webinar event. We'll see you shortly. As a reminder, the consultation is running until the 12th of August. And aside from this webinar, you can always find out more information on our website. And once more, a reminder of that web address, it's lowerthamescrossing.co.uk/design-consultation. Using the website or Highways England Contact Centre at 0300 123 5000, you can also schedule a callback with a member of the team to ask any questions that you might have regarding any of the refinements at all. And you can also submit a request for printed consultation materials using any of these methods. I'm going to take a moment now just to remind you how you can submit a question to today's Q&A session. Depending on how you're watching the webinar, your view may look like one of the three options that you can see on the screen. Just look for where the question area is indicated by the red circle. That's where you type your question. We may not have time to get to all the questions today, so if your question isn't answered, I would encourage you to book that callback using our telephone surgery service. Callbacks can be booked on the website, or you can call us on 0300 123 5000. Okay, we're going to be focusing today's Q&A session on areas of the Lower Thames crossing proposals that are north of the River Thames. So I know a number of questions have come through both before and during the webinar. And I think the first question we've got this evening, and I think, Gary, this is one for you. The question is, have you considered cut and cover in the area near Chadwell and Orsett Heath, or considered moving the route further east past Brentwood Road, which would give relief to the residents? Gary, can you pick that up?
Yeah, sure. We have actually made a presentation to Thurrock Task Force on this query, and what I'd like to say is that we recognise that cut and cover tunnel routes have a purpose, and sections of cut and cover have been included at the tunnel portals and within the junctions as necessary, and that we do actually build cut and cover tunnels normally at locations where there's development, or there's development above or near the alignment that might have an increase, significant change in the topography or proximity to buildings, utilities, or something like that. We usually put those, where we are close to infrastructure. But since the preferred route announcement, we have reduced the alignment north of the river considerably, and we've also put in false cutting, which is bunding at either side. I mean, Steve mentioned it earlier in the presentation that he put forward. So we've tried to disguise the route by putting these false cuttings in, which are mounds either side of the actual scheme. I mean, for those, just to explain what a cut and cover tunnel is, it's essentially a concrete trough where the road sits in the bottom of the trough, and you put a lid over the top, so it actually buries the scheme. And with doing that, there's a lot of technical constraints with doing it. It makes a much wider footprint for the scheme. It takes a lot longer to build. It would increase the carbon footprint, and one of the other things it would do, it would limit any possible future connectivity in the future. So if there was a junction required at a later date, you would not be able to connect to the actual road. It's also, I mean, if you're going through somewhere like the Mar Dyke, it would create environmental issues as you were building it. And finally, really, it would be up to 12 times more expensive. So with that, we've taken a view on what we've built, we've designed, and we think it's the right solution at this location. And we will be thoroughly tested when we go to DCO.
Indeed. Thanks, Gary, for that really comprehensive response. The next question, Steve, I think this is one for you. This person is asking, I'm keen to understand how walkers and cyclists will travel along the A127 traversing the M25 roundabout, given the new slip road that's proposed. Steve, can you answer that?
Yeah, sure. So that's one of the changes we've made in this consultation, actually, is whoever's asked the question is quite right in pointing out that the Lower Thames Crossing scheme will have these dedicated left slip from the A127 and onto the A127 to Lower Thames Crossing. And in doing so, that will sever the existing connections which are there right now. So it is possible, there's a footway alongside the A127, it's possible to walk along there on the south side through the junction under the M25. And what we propose to do as part of this design refinement consultation is actually to create a new crossing via a bridge over the A127. That will allow non-motorised users, walkers, cyclists, to cross from the south side of the A127 to the north side, where we will then take them in a similar way to now, but on the north side of the junction under the M25. And the junction is also going to be signalised as part of our proposals, and therefore the signals will allow pedestrians, cyclists to cross at the junction safely. So it should provide a good route east-west along the A127. We're also promoting a secondary route, which is sort of hugs the boundary of the southeastern side of the junction. So it goes west along the A127 and then turns south through the development site on that area, and we're coordinating with the developers of that site. The route runs south alongside the M25 and then under the M25 close to the Shoeburyness Railway, and then connects into the Cranham playing fields. So there's a secondary route there that we're also promoting as part of the sort of wider connectivity. I hope that answers that particular question.
Thank you, Steve. And if you've got anything you want to feed back on those changes, then do make sure that you submit a response to the consultation. The next question, Gary, perhaps you can pick this up. This is about motorcycles, asking us, will we confirm that motorcycles will be toll-free in line with your statement that charging will be the same as the Dartford crossing? And supplementary to that, do motorway traffic rules apply? And are learners with L plates riding powered two-wheelers, i.e. motorcycles, allowed? Quite a lot in that question.
I mean, on this one, I think the level of charging and charging regime would replicate the same as the approach applied at the Dartford crossing. So yes, motorcycle would be free. Dartford crossing has a lower speed limit at 50 miles an hour, whereas LTC is going to be 70 miles per hour. So we can't allow powered vehicles onto the road, as it would not be as safe. So we are looking at putting certain restrictions on the tunnel crossing. But as far as the motorway traffic rules, we're still trying to find out some more on that, and also the rules for L plates. So we will clarify that in our planning application. So we're just reviewing actually what our proposals are. So we will clarify that when we go to our planning application.
Thanks very much, Gary. We've had a question come in about the questions that we're covering this evening and that are coming in during the consultation period, asking us, are all the questions that are given during the consultation period or on the webinar sessions visible to the general public? And will the answers be available as part of the online consultation document, notwithstanding the GDPR sensitivities of specific homeowners' questions? I think I can probably answer that. For reasons of protecting privacy and people's identity, the questions aren't available to the public that are coming through on the webinar this evening. Not everybody wants their questions shared in a public forum, so we've respected that. But it is important to recognise that the reason why we're holding this webinar this evening is so that we can better inform people so they can provide official responses to the consultation. and it's those responses which will be formally captured in the consultation report, which of course forms part of our development consent order, which will be submitted later on this year. So the questions that come through this evening in the webinar, they don't form part of the official consultation report, but of course responses which may have been informed by any questions people may ask on any of the platforms available throughout the consultation period or in the webinar definitely will feed through into the consultation report. So I hope that helps on that. Let me just have a quick look. I've slightly lost my place while I was answering that, but I can see what the next question is now. This is a question about horse riding. Steve, quite a straightforward question here. What are your horse riding plans? I take it that means plans for people who want to go horse riding near the scheme.
Sure, okay. So I think in total there's just under 50 kilometres of footpaths, bridleways proposed as part of Lower Thames Crossing. That's reconnecting existing routes plus some additional. I think the split between north and south is slightly more in the north, about 28 kilometres, something like that in the north. The remainder in the south of the river, that is. I think the best thing in terms of specifics for equestrians is to visit the consultation website, and there's an interactive map which will show you where all the routes are. I think it's fair to say it doesn't go into the detail of defining every single bridleway or every single footpath, and that's partly because we're still working through that detail at the moment. We're at what they call the preliminary design stage of the project, and although we'll be promoting routes for walkers, cyclists and horse riders within our development consent order, the detail of those routes will come at a later date as the scheme progresses. But please have a look on the website where there's an excellent interactive map, and hopefully you'll be able to see the routes in your particular area.
Thanks, Steve. And Gary, we've had a couple of questions about the route come in, which are fairly similar, and they're questions about the proximity to Linford, asking us, can we explain why the route has been moved 60 metres closer to Linford, and why is the Lower Thames Crossing so close to Linford when it could have been moved west?
Yeah, sure. There hasn't been a change in the alignment in this round of the consultation. We haven't changed the alignment through this section. We did consult on this during the supplementary consultation when we moved the route about 60 metres, we moved it 60 metres further north to east, and it did move closer to Linford. The move was to avoid having to move some overhead cables and pylons. So we looked at avoiding communities where we can mitigate noise and air quality. I mean, that's one of the key constraints when we're looking at putting an alignment in. We look at where the communities are to keep the alignment away from communities as much as possible, and we take a balanced approach to our design, looking at all the constraints. And where we found an alignment that sits between the communities, the utilities, and the natural features like watercourses, we try to make sure that it does fit into this location. We will be using false cuttings to reduce the visual and noise of the alignment in that location.
Thank you, Gary. It is always a difficult balance. I think we've got time for a couple more questions before we close this evening. Steve, one for you. How near will the road be to Brandon Groves in South Ockenden? Do you have the detail of that?
Yes. Well, I'm going to give two parts the answer here, but I believe Lower Thames Crossing is about 1 kilometre north of Brandon Groves and about 3 kilometres east. But I think the best thing, as I said with the answer to the equestrian routes question. If the person asking that question visits our consultation website and goes to the interactive map, there's a very good search tool. You can put in your location, your postcode, and you can see where you are in relation to the route. And there's also a measurement tool, so you can actually measure off exactly how close you are, your property is, and that'll give you a more accurate answer. But I believe it's 1 kilometre north and 3 to the east, approximately.
Thank you for that, Steve. Well remembered. And I think we've got time for one more, Steve. I don't know if you can pick this up before we close. Why a footbridge and not a shared use bridge near the Thames Chase Community Forest?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd have to look into the details of that. Whether if we've described it as a footbridge, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not for wider use. Be happy to take a specific question, if the person asking that would like to do a callback. As Sarah described earlier, if you call our information line, we can get somebody to call you back on that specific point and we'll clarify it. But I think the bridge from Thames Chase Forest over the M25 can be used by a wider range of users, i.e. walkers, cyclists and equestrian users, just because it's described as a footbridge. We usually use that term to mean sort of non-motorized users, so it's not a road bridge. But happy to clarify that further if that answer is not sufficient.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks very much indeed. Okay, I think that's probably all we've got time for this evening. That concludes the Q&A, and as you can see on your screen right now, we've got one more webinar which takes place tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. On that webinar, we're going to be covering the proposed refinements on the south side of the river in Kent. Please do register for the website on our website, lowerthamescrossing.co.uk design/consultation if you're interested in listening into the proposed refinements on the other side of the river tomorrow evening. So as a quick reminder, the consultation does close in 2 weeks' time on the 12th of August. You can respond to the consultation either through our website, by post or by email. And if you do know anyone who doesn't have access to the internet, they're also able to phone through to us on 0300 123 5000 to make sure that they provide their response to the consultation over the telephone. So that's all we've got time for today. Concludes the webinar. I hope you found it useful and informative. On behalf of me and my fellow panelists, Steve and Gary, and of course the entire backroom team who make all this wizardry possible, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us this evening to discuss the latest proposals for the Lower Thames Crossing. In the meantime, stay safe and have a great evening. Bye-bye.